Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar focused on plan sponsor trends. We're going to get started here in just a moment. Okay, first and foremost, thank you for joining us, and we hope this webinar is insightful. Before we get started, I'd like to note that all attendees are on mute, but you can submit questions through the control panel in the questions field. Only the speakers will be able to see your questions. So let's get started. Our key presenter today is Kevin Teague, Vice President and Retirement Director at Fidelity Investments. He will be sharing insights from Fidelity's 9th edition of their Plan Sponsor Attitude Survey, which notes how plan sponsors are approaching their retirement plans. But first, Bill Karsten, a senior consultant here at Plan Pilot, will share a few observations from his experience in serving his plan sponsor clients. Please welcome Bill.
Lucilda, thank you for that introduction. I'm just going to take a few minutes here and provide a brief overview from the plan advisor side of the fence before turning it over to Kevin for him to share his insights. So what our experience has been to date at Plan Pilot, where first I should note, most of our clients engage us as their first plan advisor. So our experience has been many of them initially have not established formal plan governance and oversight procedures, and so their initial focus tends to often be more in those areas of ensuring that fees have been properly reviewed and negotiated, and that investments have been thoroughly reviewed and vetted, and then getting that formal plan oversight in place. And part of that process for us is always to conduct initial and ongoing fiduciary training, which there's always an emphasis from our position placed on the obligation to act in participants' best interest. So we're already building that momentum towards, let's get towards some of those bigger plan decisions that really how we're going to improve that participant impact. So it really, the focus quickly shifts toward, how can we make this plan better for our plan participants? And part of that's, self-motivated from the plan sponsor's perspective, in terms of, we want to be able to attract and retain a talented workforce, as we know here. But also, as everybody has heard a lot about these days, there's certainly that focus on the retirement readiness and how do we maximize plan design. And we've had a lot of great discussions and implementations with our clients where, they've shifted how they utilize the employer dollars to draw in more employee contributions, and then also certainly features of auto enrollment and auto escalation are big in that plan design. And certainly I can even give an example of a client who I think made an excellent choice recently to auto enroll their participants at the maximum match amount and then go beyond to auto escalate further to take them up to 10%, and actually that means a total 16% contribution, which really is going to drive better retirement readiness for those participants. And then the other area of focus also is on the investment side, and really having that balance between diversification opportunity with the overall simplicity. And really what we mean by that is a lot of our clients, they've put a lot of great investments out on their menu, but over time they're just building and building and building, and before they know it, oftentimes it's become a bit overwhelming. So a lot of times we've had some good changes there just to bring simplicity, to make it easier for plan participants to understand. So that's really what we're seeing. We want to have Kevin share his insights. So I'd just like to quickly reintroduce Kevin Teague, Vice President and Retirement Director at Fidelity Investments. And Kevin will take you through their 9th annual Plan Sponsor Attitude Survey and some of their key insights. Kevin?
Thank you, Bill. I will take control here. And great. All right. Thank you for the introduction and setting the stage for me. Again, Kevin Teague with Fidelity Investments 401k. I'm going to take you through a highlight of our Plan Sponsor Attitude Survey, touch upon some of the things that Bill actually referenced earlier in his portion, and talk about some of the things that we are seeing from our top advisor partners in the marketplace and things that you maybe should be expecting from your advisors that you work with on your plans today. So a little context for the survey first. I think it's important to know where we're coming from on this and some of the history behind it. So in 2018, we surveyed a little over 1,100 plan sponsors, varying plan sizes. You can see the breakdown there. So pretty good cross-section of different employer sizes, different plan sizes, some Fidelity clients and mostly non-Fidelity clients. So gives you a good idea of a pulse on the marketplace in general. Also, we looked at a few different groups within each employer that we spoke with. So broken down about a third each in the finance, so a CFO or controller, human resources team, and then owners or CEOs, so an executive viewpoint as well. So gives you an idea of who we're talking to, and some of the details that you'll see in the full version of this will break out some of the differing concerns of each of those groups. Moving on to a bit of the history behind, there we go, a bit of a history behind Fidelity's Plan Sponsor Attitude Survey. As Bill and Blissilda mentioned, this is our 9th annual version. We should be coming out with a 10th version here in the not too distant future. But you'll see across the timeline there's been shifting concerns, overarching concerns from one year to the next. And a lot of times it ties into what's happening in Washington, D.C. around legislation. So you can see in 2010, when fee disclosure was required, managing the fee disclosure changes was the #1 most important thing to the plan sponsor respondents. And then in 2016 and 17, with the DOL fiduciary rule that doesn't exist now, but was ramping up to be in place at that time, there was concern around fiduciary, and we saw a much higher rate of advisor change. In 2018, the theme really is plan design for better outcomes, and that can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. We're going to get into that in just a moment, but it gives you an idea of the shifting concerns over time, from regulatory changes that were happening to what's best for our employees, the participants in the plan. Why are we designing this plan the way we are, and what goals are we trying to achieve? I'll move into a shift in focus. So what we found is that the vast majority of respondents are working with an advisor. This is up every year in the time that we've done the survey. Peaked in 2017, like I said, with the advent of the DOL rule. And 22% still are looking to switch advisors. So there's still some turnover in the marketplace. Plan sponsors and employees are not getting exactly what they need from their current advisors and maybe looking. So there's been an increased interest in reviewing advisory services in the marketplace. But the sponsor focus is shifting back to participants. So we ask these questions. What is your top concern as a plan sponsor and employer? Why did you begin using an advisor? And what's the most important thing your plan advisor provides to you? And what we found on the concern side is, and this may be a little surprising, that some of the things that we've seen in the past don't necessarily crack the top 3 this year, but is the plan effectively preparing employees for retirement financially? Bill mentioned this earlier, creating situations that we can drive better outcomes for employees. Is the plan helping to retain top workers? Anyone who knows recruiting and retention is expensive and time consuming. So what can we do to enhance the benefit to retain those top workers? And are plan related business costs being reduced? The reasons they're hiring advisors, they want to understand how well the plan is working for the employees. You'll see this a lot, the importance of the employee's perspective on how the plan is working. The company's grown. The retirement plans become more complicated. The market has had a unprecedented run, and plans are growing at a rapid rate. Companies are hiring more. Mergers and acquisitions are up. Plans are becoming more complex. We hire an advisor to help us manage that complexity, make the complex simple. And I think this is universal, there's less time to go around. 401k plan it's become more complex. How can we offload some of that so we can save time to focus on our core business or our core function at the company? So talking about the fiduciary concerns peaking in 2017, there was a vast, it was a large increase in the number of plan sponsors who were looking to hire an advisor. A lot of those were first timers, so they had gone without advisors for quite a while. The DOL rule kind of nudged them in the direction of hiring an advisor. That number's dropped a little bit. Fiduciary is still important, but I think that with the education that's happened over the last 2 years, the fiduciary concerns have been alleviated a little bit. But I think importantly on the right side of this slide is the type of fiduciary support that advisors are providing. There are still advisors who don't service participants in a fiduciary manner or in the employer in a fiduciary manner. But what we're seeing is that the trend is to be both of those. So if you're concerned about advisor you're working with that's not providing fiduciary support on both sides of the table, it could be a good chance to evaluate services in that situation.
Kevin,
So
we have a question for you. Yeah,
okay,
just a question we have here. What do you see advisors doing to help clients address the top concerns that were identified in your survey?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it does vary a bit based from advisor to advisor team. But one of the things that we're seeing our top advisor partners do is help solve for the biggest concerns. Recruiting and retention have cropped up that list of concerns every year, and it's becoming more expensive to attract and retain talent, especially if you're competing for talent with Fortune 100 or Fortune 500 companies. I'll tell a quick story. I spoke with a company in Chicago, a technology company in Chicago, and when you Google their name, you always get suggestions of who else or what other companies are like the company that you're looking at. And so when you look at that column on the right, so this is a 300-person company, and on the right, where your suggested other searches, it's Oracle, it's Salesforce, it's Microsoft, and the like. So this company does what these companies do, and they're competing for talent in their backyard. So the advisor partners that we see that are most successful are helping their clients evaluate all their benefits. Not just retirement. We're focused on retirement today, but how do all these things work together and make a compelling offer to a candidate for a job that also may be looking at one of those Fortune 100 companies that you compete with for talent on a regular basis. So I think that's been one of the things that our really successful advisor partners are doing, is making sure that they're talking about the benefits as a whole, and with the lens of retaining and recruiting talent. So, any other questions? We can move on here. So, Bill also alluded to a little bit of discussion around the investment menu and plan design, and we saw in this, and I don't think there's any surprises here, that most of the plan sponsors we talked to reported making some changes. There was a marked increase in increasing the number of investment options available. And then a little bit more detail around some of the investment changes that plan sponsors have made in the last 2 years, increasing the number available, adding index funds, replacing underperforming funds. These are very standard things that we see on a regular basis as you work with your advisor and providers to evaluate the fund lineup. But what we found, and Bill, you alluded to this earlier, and I'll come back to that because I think it drives home a very important point, and I think you can speak on this a little bit further, is what we found is that for every 10 funds that are just added to the plan lineup, we predict that participation rate will drop by 2%. So you think you're solving a problem by giving people more options, but in fact, it may be driving a negative behavior in the plan.
No, agreed, Kevin. And, I just spoke earlier about we've worked with some clients who have very expansive menus, and we've helped them narrow those down. And often that's tough because there are a lot of funds that they've selected are performing well, and there's that concern of how will participants react if choices are taken away. And our experience has been it's actually very well received, recognizing that for most of our clients, their participants don't have this deep investment knowledge base, and it really helps them make good decisions if they have more limited choices within reason. On the other side of the fence, we've seen where there have been limited menus, and you spoke to that earlier, Kevin, and we certainly help them expand that a little bit for those do-it-yourself investors. But there certainly is a point where you can add too much, even if they're good funds, to where it can just become too overwhelming for the majority of participants.
Yeah, very good point. And then, so we'll turn the page a little bit from investment menu and talk about plan design. And I think it's maybe an underutilized tool in the tool belt in terms of driving better outcomes in the plan. But 82% of the respondents reported making some change to the plan design. You'll see the two drivers behind plan design changes: increasing participation and increasing savings rate. So we want to get more people in the plan. We want them saving more than they were before. And so some of those plan design changes that have happened in the last couple of years, most frequently, is added or changing a matching contribution. So enhancing the match or starting up a match, re-enrolling in target date, adding Roth, very common option now that usually doesn't cost your plan anything extra in terms of administrative costs. Our two heavy hitters are automatic increase and automatic enrollment. We're going to dive into those a little bit more here shortly. So auto enroll and annual increase, you can see these are trend lines over time for plan design changes. A lot has changed from 2012 to 2017 and 18 in terms of adding auto enroll and annual increase. And a lot of the conversation around with our clients about starting auto enrollment as a plan design feature is fear around how the participants will react. A lot of times there's pushback, and they say, "Whoa, our people won't respond kindly to being automatically enrolled in the retirement plan. They just won't. We know them, and they won't do it." What we've found is that our participation rate for plans that have automatic enrollment is 86%. So when we auto enroll, it's very rare, and a little less than, or a little about around 14% of those folks actually opt out of the automatic enrollment. Everybody stays in, and in fact, 23% of those are increasing that deferral rate from whatever the automatic enrollment deferral rate is. So it's working. It's actually being well received by plan participants. So, and I think this is important data to know if you've considered it or had a conversation with your advisor around automatic enrollment, is that it's actually being well received by the folks who do implement it. On the left side, we see that about 70% of employees are reporting that they're very satisfied with their plan in an auto enrollment situation. 84% participation rate among 20 to 29-year-olds. So the toughest ones to get in are your millennials, and automatic enrollment is one of the ways that you can get them in and keep them in the plan to help drive deferral rates. And then when we think about implementing auto enrollment, we dove into this a little bit further with the respondents, and what we're seeing is that it may be a problem that's not being addressed by the current advisor. Not recommending auto enrollment as a possible solution has come up before, and under the column 3, dispelling the myth, I talk about that pushback that we see sometimes from clients about what plan our participants will react positively to, and automatic enrollment not being one of those. We see that at Fidelity, plans with a 3% automatic enrollment default deferral rate have an 83% participation rate. But those with a 6% deferral rate actually are participating at a slightly higher clip at 86%. So having auto enroll is a great first step. Setting it up for success from the get-go 3% to 6% will make an incredible difference in the outcome for those participants. If we can start them at 6%, they're much more likely to hit their goals. And we'll talk a little bit about the retirement math behind this in a moment. But what we found is that the increase between 3 and 6% as an automatic, or as the deferral start percentage, actually increases plan participation. So there's less pushback in those situations.
Kevin, I do have an additional question that came in, and the
Sure.
question is, what is the participation rate that you see in plans that do not have auto enrollment?
So the non-auto enroll, I don't think it's on here, but it's around the 65% rate. So auto enroll is making a huge difference in participation rates versus the non-auto enroll plans that we have on the books. The other thing I'll point out in this slide on column 2 is that auto enroll is a much more common feature in our larger plan, our larger clients' plans. So think of your Fortune 500. I told that story earlier. One of those things that when you go to work for Microsoft, or I'll name them just because they were part of the story previously, is that you expect to be automatically enrolled in your retirement plan. That's much more common. That is part of that experience that you may be looking for to help make your benefit more competitive. A lot of times they expect to be auto enrolled in a plan these days, and so it's a feature that can be turned on that actually may help you compete and retain talent by making the benefits package look a little bit similar to what you see elsewhere in the marketplace. So I mentioned retirement plan math as one of the factors in that 3% to 6% deferral start rate. Here are the rules of thumb, and I think that if you take away anything, is that top section of the slide there is probably the most daunting part of the entire equation around retirement readiness, better outcomes for employees. Is when an employee sees that, a participant sees these numbers, it gets things going in their head. So what's my target retirement age? How much do I need? How much am I trying to replace? And then how do I get there? So all of our tools and resources are using the targets of retiring at 67, having 10x your final pre-retirement income saved, and replacing about 45% of your income through your 401k. How are we getting people there? Contribution and match, starting early, and asset allocation. Of course, people are challenged with not having enough savings, retiring early or unexpectedly, and inadequate planning. They started planning too late, and they're behind the 8 ball, unfortunately. When we look at the details, so the problem is one of the factors is starting early, saving from the age of 25 to 67. That's a long period of time. 42 years is what our assumption is. How do we get people started? We need to auto-enroll them. That they're expecting it. It's the easiest way to get people in the plan, and people are staying in the plan. If you look at then saving enough, we target 15% of total savings, employer and employee contributions. Starting them at 3 as an auto-enroll feature isn't going to get them to that 15 rate. So we look at it as a 6% default rate, automatic increase, and then when the employer can, creating or enhancing a strategic match to encourage deferrals. Those are the deep plan design conversations that you should be having with your plan advisor to ensure that you're driving the right behavior in plans. In fact, I talked to a client recently whose match formula was half contributing 50% on the dollar up to the first 10% of deferrals. Now, not many people are saving 10% in their retirement plan, especially our lower earners. So what they're doing is they're not incenting the right behavior in their employees to save and match accordingly. So these are some of the things that you can look at strategically to drive better outcomes and increase participation and actual savings rates. Asset allocation, Bill alluded to this earlier, creating a menu that's efficient with options that cross the spectrum in terms of types of investors, between the do-it-yourself or do-it-for-me investors, target dates, making sure you evaluate target dates as they relates to the goals of the plan. And then we think that 10x final salary by the age of 67 is where employees need to be in terms of savings. Monitoring and constant check back on goals and progress towards those goals is incredibly important. So is your advisor engaging employees in those conversations? Are the providers that you're working with constantly engaging employees in those types of conversations and driving those better outcomes? So that is the bulk of what we wanted to talk about today. We have a few minutes left over for questions. I wanted to let Bill take a look at the question pod and see if there's anything else that had come up.
I don't have any other questions at this point, Kevin.
Okay, very good. So
but
I'll
certainly
wrap with saying that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Bill.
Oh, I was just going to say, certainly would encourage anybody who does have additional questions. Kevin just put our contact information up on the screen, so feel free to reach out either to me or to Kevin. Just want to thank everybody for joining us today. Hope you got some good insights out of this presentation, and please don't be shy about reaching out to us just if you have a question from this presentation or otherwise that you'd like to have addressed. Otherwise, hope everybody has a great day. And Kevin, I don't know if you have any parting thoughts before we go.
No, I don't. I thank you everyone for the time. Thank you, Bill and Basilda, for hosting, and we appreciate the opportunity to share.